I never thought I'd walk into a church and see my own funeral. There I was, my face smiling from a photo on the altar, framed by lilies and roses. Guests in black bowed their heads, and at the pulpit, my son Daniel spoke into the microphone. My mother, Mary Caldwell, was the most selfless woman I've ever known. My knees nearly buckled. I wasn't dead, but he had already buried me. A little girl tugged her mother's sleeve, pointing at me in the doorway. "Mommy, there's a ghost." Gasps spread through the sanctuary. Someone screamed. Programs fluttered to the floor. And Daniel, my own son, froze mid-eulogy, his face draining white. He wasn't grieving. He was cornered. Because while I lay in a coma, he forged my death certificate, emptied my accounts, and signed away my house. I stepped into the aisle, each footfall echoing like a verdict. My voice was low, steady. "You're celebrating a little early, don't you think?" Gasps again. Silence. Daniel stepped down, trembling. Maybe he thought he was seeing a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was his mother. And I hadn't come back to forgive. 2 weeks earlier, I opened my eyes to the sickening glow of fluorescent lights and the hollow beep of a heart monitor. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My body felt like a cinder block sinking in black water. A nurse leaned over me, her face swimming in and out of focus. "She's awake," she whispered. Relief softened her tone, but her eyes betrayed something else. Pity, fear. "Mary, you've been unconscious for 9 days. You were in a car accident, internal injuries, head trauma, surgery," she swallowed. "You've been in a coma." The words barely registered. My tongue felt like sandpaper. My lips cracked as I rasped. "Family, where is my son?" Her gaze faltered. "We tried contacting them. Your son." She hesitated, choosing each word like it could cut me open. "He signed the release. He thought you wouldn't make it." Release. My pulse spiked. The room tilted. "What? Release?" She adjusted the IV instead of answering directly. "The hospital chaplain came, even your priest. They were told you wouldn't recover, that you didn't want to be kept alive." Her hand froze for a second. "Your next of kin signed the end-of-life directive." End of life. While I was still breathing, I blinked hard as the fluorescent lights above blurred into streaks. He had done this. Daniel, my son, the boy I'd once cradled against my chest after nightmares, now signing papers to erase me. "Has he visited?" My voice cracked like old wood. The nurse bit her lip, shook her head. "No, ma'am." Not Mom. Not once in 9 days had anyone spoken that word over me. Lucky. That's what they called me when the doctor came. Lucky to have woken. Lucky to still have my mind. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow. I felt discarded. For 2 days, I lay in that bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying it all. The screech of tires, the airbag exploding, then the long, empty dark. And over it, another sound. Daniel's voice, calm, convincing, lying through his teeth. She wouldn't want to live like this. He had already buried me in his mind, maybe in his heart too. By the 3rd morning, I forced myself up. My legs trembled. My ribs screamed with every breath. But I stood. I walked down that sterile hallway in a paper gown, with a nurse hovering like I might collapse at any second. When I was discharged, I thought, foolishly, that someone would be there. A card, a call, a single flower on the nightstand. Nothing. The silence was deafening. The kind of silence you don't get from forgetfulness, only from intent. The silence of people who hoped I was gone. I called a cab. The driver asked if I'd been visiting someone sick. I stared out the window, my voice flat. Yes. I didn't tell him the truth, that I was the sick relative, the one left for dead. But when I reached my house, keys shaking in my hand, I realized the truth was worse. The nightmare wasn't ending. It was only beginning. The taxi slowed in front of my house, or what used to be my house. The front gate sagged crooked, like someone had backed into it and never cared to fix it. Weeds strangled the gardenias I planted last spring. My rose bushes, Daniel's favorite when he was a boy, hung dead and brittle, thorns still clinging to stems that no one had watered. I stepped out of the cab, pain ripping through my ribs. I grabbed the mailbox to steady myself. It overflowed. Flyers, bills, even a jury summons, stamped 3 weeks ago, all with my name, still alive, still breathing. My hands shook as I reached under the old blue ceramic turtle by the steps. The spare key was still there, a small mercy, but when the lock turned, it resisted. Like even the house didn't want me back. Inside, the air was wrong, not just quiet, abandoned. Dust coated the counters. The fridge hung open, sour milk pooling inside. My answering machine blinked red, 22 unheard messages, waiting for a ghost to return them. The pictures in the hallway tilted sideways, as if the walls themselves had sighed and given up. In the living room, the TV was unplugged, the cushions gone, curtains yanked shut. No one had packed, no one had moved, but no one had lived here either. I drifted to the back patio, some foolish part of me still expecting Daniel to be there. Beer in hand, ribs smoking on the grill, that half grin on his face when he was still mine. But the patio was empty. He hadn't been here in days, maybe weeks. I called his cell, straight to voicemail. I called Laura's. Same. My throat went dry. Then I heard it, a car door slamming across the street. Mrs. Thompson stood frozen on her porch, a grocery bag slipping from her arms. Oranges rolled into the gutter. Her lips parted. "Mary?" Her voice cracked like glass. "Mary, is that you?" I nodded, barely able to stand. She crossed herself, eyes wide. "But Daniel said you'd passed. He told everyone, we lit candles for you, we cried for you." The words hit harder than any car crash. My ribs ached with each syllable. "He said you didn't make it, that the arrangements had been handled." She pressed a hand to her mouth, whispering, "Dear God, we buried you." The street tilted. I clutched the railing, breath shattering in my chest. She stared at me like I was something unholy, like I had climbed out of the ground instead of a hospital bed. And maybe she was right, because what else do you call a woman who comes home to find her son has already declared her dead? I wasn't in the grave, but my trust was. And this time, it wasn't coming back. I sat on the edge of my porch steps, holding the warm jury summons in my lap like it might tell me who I still was. Mrs. Lewis, my next-door neighbor for 22 years, walked slowly across the lawn. Her cane thumped softly with each step. "Mary," she whispered. "Lord have mercy. I almost called the police when I saw you." I looked up at her through swollen eyes. "You, too?" She nodded, then lowered herself gingerly beside me. "You don't know, do you?" "Know what?" She looked away, like she was embarrassed to say it out loud. "Your memorial service is today." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Today," she repeated, her voice trembling. "At St. Bridget's, 1 o'clock. The whole neighborhood's going. Daniel told us you wanted something simple. No casket, no viewing. He said it was what you asked for in your will." My mouth went dry. "There is no will," I whispered. She reached for my hand. "He said you didn't want visitors at the hospital. Said you passed peacefully 2 nights ago. That he was handling everything quietly." I shook my head. "I was discharged yesterday," she gasped. "Mary." I couldn't move. I just stared straight ahead, my hand limp in hers. She squeezed tighter. "It's not right. Not what he's doing." But I didn't know what to believe. "Do you now?" Her eyes welled up. "Oh, honey, I do now." We sat in silence, 2 old women who had seen too much and still not enough. The sun beat down, mocking the chill running through my bones. Mrs. Lewis reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded flyer. "He gave these out to all the neighbors. Told us you didn't want an obituary in the paper." I opened it. It was a printed program. "In loving memory of Mary Caldwell, beloved mother, neighbor, and friend, 1949 to 2025. There it was, my death, in Arial font, with a grainy photo of me from the church potluck last Easter. I felt bile rise in my throat. "He invited the pastor, even had food catered," she said softly. I was just about to leave. "The service starts in an hour." I stood. "Mary?" I gripped the porch railing and took a shaky breath. "Do you think you could drive me?" She stared. "To the church?" I nodded. I think it's time I attended my own funeral. The ride was silent, except for the rosary beads rattling on the mirror like a countdown. Mrs. Lewis offered to drop me at the steps. I refused. I needed to walk. 3 blocks. That's all. But every step burned. My ribs screamed. My body begged me to stop. I didn't, because with every step, the memories came back, sharper than the pain. Daniel's 5th grade graduation. I was the only parent clapping until my palms bled. His first college letter. He sobbed into my shoulder while I swallowed the fear of a second mortgage. The night he showed up broke, begging for help. I handed him my savings with a smile, telling him it was just until things evened out. I never asked for it back. Every sacrifice, every quiet yes, every swallowed no, they weren't regrets anymore. They were receipts. And this walk, these 3 blocks toward the church where my son buried me alive, wasn't grief. It was collection day. A couple passed me. The woman froze mid-step, clutching her husband's arm. "Mary?" she whispered. Her face went white. "But the service." I kept walking. By the time I reached the stone steps of St. Bridget's, my body was shaking. But my spine stayed straight. I pressed my hand to the heavy wooden door. Inside, laughter, voices. Daniel's voice, reading my eulogy like scripture. I looked down at myself. Not a coffin, not a ghost, just me, Mary Caldwell, the woman he thought he could erase. And in that moment, something hardened in me. I wasn't here to crash a funeral. I was here to bury a lie. The handle was cold, heavy. I pushed. Incense hit first, then silence. Heads whipped toward me, gasps, screams, someone crossing themselves in terror. And there, on the altar, framed by lilies, smiling as if already gone, me, a lie dressed up as a legacy. I stepped inside. My heels echoed on the stone floor. Daniel froze at the pulpit. His voice died in his throat. His face turned the color of ash. I let the silence stretch, then lifted my chin. "You're celebrating a little early, don't you think?" Gasps rippled like thunder through the pews. A hymnal crashed to the floor. One woman screamed. A little boy near the front pointed with trembling hands. "Mommy, is that a ghost?" His mother pulled him close, eyes wide, whispering a prayer under her breath. Daniel staggered back from the pulpit, gripping it for balance. His lips moved soundlessly before a strangled noise escaped. Half denial, half panic. Laura's handkerchief fluttered to the ground. Her gaze darted between me and the smiling photo on the altar like she was staring at an apparition she couldn't banish. Good. Let them see a ghost. My cane tapped against the tiles as I walked down the aisle, each step louder than the last. A death march. But not mine. Pastor Willard stepped forward, voice cracking. "Dear Lord Mary, how?" "I walked," I said flatly. "Some of us still can." A wave of whispers surged through the congregation. Shock wasn't grief anymore. It was scandal. I stopped at the front pew, raised my chin, and turned to them all. I was discharged from the hospital yesterday, alive, breathing, and not a single person from my family came to get me. Daniel stumbled toward me, voice a desperate hiss. "What are you doing? You'll ruin everything." I met his eyes and smiled coldly. "You mean your performance?" Laura sprang up. "She's confused." "The accident. She doesn't know what she's saying." I snapped. My voice cut like glass. "You think I'm too weak to remember who signed me away? Too broken to recall who filed the death notice?" The crowd's murmur swelled into outrage. "He told us she was cremated," someone said. Another voice rang louder. "She looks mighty uncremated to me." Daniel reached for my arm. I jerked back. "Don't touch me." Then I turned to the crowd, my hand shaking. Not with fear, but fury. I raised the manila folder. "These are my hospital records, stamped yesterday, discharge papers. Proof that I am alive." I held them high, paper trembling in the light. and with a voice that burned hotter than the incense, I declared, "My son buried me alive," while my heart was still beating. The silence that followed wasn't holy. It was judgment. Daniel lunged forward, trying to push me toward the side aisle, his voice low and sharp. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? We need to talk in private." I yanked my arm free. My voice cut through the sanctuary. "No, Daniel, we're going to talk right here. In front of all these people who think they buried me." His face twisted. First anger, then fear, then that slippery mask he always wore when caught. Charm. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I snapped. "You told the hospital I wouldn't make it. You signed me off. And before I was even out of the ICU, you had this little show planned, didn't you?" He glanced at Laura. Her face had gone pale. This time she wasn't backing him up. The congregation stirred. People stood, not out of reverence, but disbelief. Phones lifted, whispers sharpened. Mrs. Wallace from the bakery crossed herself 3 times and dropped back into her seat like she might faint. Daniel leaned in close, hissing, "You're not thinking clearly. You were unconscious for a week. No one knew if you'd pull through. I made the best decision I could." "No," I said louder, letting it carry. "You made the most profitable one. Executor of my estate. Access to my accounts. Power of attorney. So tidy." Pastor Willard stepped forward, voice strained. "Son, perhaps we should pause the service and clarify." "She's confused," Daniel barked, shoving the pastor's hand off his shoulder, his voice cracked, desperate. "She's not in her right mind." "Say it again," I challenged, my eyes burning into his. "Tell them I'm confused. Tell them I imagined the gas shut off, the bank accounts drained, the house abandoned like I'd already been lowered into the ground." His jaw clenched. His mouth stayed shut. Then Laura stood, slowly, too slowly. "Daniel," her voice trembled, "you said the paperwork was handled. You said she wouldn't come back." The room erupted. Gasps, mutters, heads shaking. I turned on her, voice sharp as glass. "And you? You sat in my pew in my church and nodded while they called me dead." Her lips quivered. "We thought it was merciful." "No." I cut her off, my voice dropping low. "You thought I was finished. You thought you were safe. You thought my silence was permanent." I turned, facing the congregation, the neighbors, friends, people who had shared meals in my kitchen, who had trusted my son because I had trusted him. "Look at me." My voice echoed. "Do I look gone? To you?" Silence. Not because they doubted, because the truth was undeniable. Because I didn't look gone. I looked furious. I stepped onto the raised platform where my funeral portrait still sat in a gilded frame, framed by 2 tall candles. I moved it aside, slowly, deliberately, and placed my folder in its place. "Let's make sure everyone hears it clearly," I said, turning to face the pews. "I was discharged from the hospital yesterday. I have not been in the ground. I have not been cremated. I was not dead. But someone in this room wanted me to be." Laura looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Daniel clenched his fists at his sides, his eyes flicking to every phone held up, every recording light blinking red. I held up the official hospital discharge papers again. Time of discharge, 11:12 a.m., yesterday morning. Signed by attending physician. Alive, breathing, talking, walking. I held up the second page. "And this?" The death certificate Daniel filed. Signed, dated, stamped. I turned it to the crowd. Issued 5 days before I left the hospital. Gasps spread like cracks in glass. Pastor Willard stepped back, his hand covering his mouth. A woman in the 3rd row whispered, "That's illegal." I lay unconscious in a hospital bed for 9 days. Daniel never visited, never called, not once. Instead, he filed to have me declared dead. so he could access my accounts as executor of my estate. Someone in the back stood up. Is this true? It was Mr. Granger, our old neighbor. Daniel, did you really tell us she passed when she hadn't? Daniel held up a hand. Everyone calmed down. This is clearly a misunderstanding. No, I said sharply. This is fraud. Another voice. She's standing right there, Daniel. Another. You sent out invites. You printed programs. The room turned restless. Whispers grew louder. People looked at each other, shifting uncomfortably. Some looked angry. Some looked betrayed. And then I said it. My own son tried to erase me. Laura broke first. We didn't know she'd wake up, she cried. Laura, Daniel hissed. Too late? Silence fell again. This time it was ice cold. I took a breath. My voice didn't shake. I didn't just come here to stop a lie. I came here to expose a crime. And believe me, I turned to Daniel, dead in the eyes. This is just the beginning. And then I stepped down, walked down that aisle, past friends whose faces twisted in shame, past neighbors who now looked at Daniel like he was something rotting, past the woman who whispered, "She's stronger than I'd ever be," out into the daylight, out of my own funeral, alive and ready for war. Mrs. Lewis caught up to me in the parking lot, breathless. They're still in there arguing, she said, clutching her purse. The pastor's trying to keep order. Laura's crying. Daniel keeps saying you're unstable. I stopped cold. Unstable? She nodded. He told them you're confused, that the hospital must have made a mistake, that maybe you weren't technically discharged. Technically? I snapped open the folder, holding up the stamped release form. They think they can gaslight an entire congregation with this? Mrs. Lewis lowered her voice. He knows he's cornered. I sank onto the garden bench, the same one where I once watched Daniel play tag after Sunday school. I gave him everything, I whispered, paid his tuition, covered his debts, cleared the mortgage on his house, and this, I tapped the paper, this is how he repays me, by declaring me dead while I was still breathing. The church doors groaned open. Pastor Willard emerged with 2 elders, his face pale. Daniel and Laura followed behind, stiff and silent. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Laura's cheeks were wet, her mascara streaked. The crowd spilled out, buzzing like hornets. Some shook their heads. Others pointed. A man I'd known since high school stopped briefly. Mary, I'm sorry, I didn't know. He left before I could reply. Laura tugged Daniel's sleeve. We need to go. I told them she was confused. Daniel hissed, just loud enough to carry. They can't prove anything. I rose to my feet. My ribs ached, but my voice cut through the lot like glass. You want proof, Daniel? I called. You think I'd walk back from the grave without it? He froze. I spoke to a lawyer the minute I woke up. This isn't just family drama. This is fraud. This is criminal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Laura's hand flew to her mouth. Pastor Willard stepped forward, sorrow in his eyes. Mary, please, this isn't the place. No, Pastor, I said, steady. The place was your pulpit when you let my son preach my funeral while I was still alive. Then I turned to Daniel, locking eyes with him until he squirmed. You dug the hole, sweetheart? My voice was low, steady, final. Now you get to live in it. And for the first time, Daniel didn't look like my son. He looked like a guilty man with nowhere left to hide. The next morning, I sat across from Miss Evelyn Clark, a state attorney, former prosecutor, and the first person in 2 weeks who looked at me like I mattered. She pushed her glasses up her nose and tapped the edge of the manila envelope I'd handed her. I've seen death certificate fraud, she said, her voice cool and precise. But this is deliberate. And sloppy. She slid the forged death certificate toward me, tapping the signature. This isn't yours. It's your son's handwriting. I nodded. I was unconscious in a hospital bed when he filed it. And this one? She held up the hospital discharge form, real and recent, bearing my name, my doctor's signature, and the date 1 day before the memorial. She raised her eyebrows. He declared you legally dead while you were still under medical care, not just immoral, criminal. I swallowed hard. What happens now? We start paper trails, she said. I've already pulled your property records. 2 assets were recently transferred into Daniel's name using executor authority. This house, she tapped the file, and a cabin property in Vermont. My hands trembled. The cabin was left to me by my sister. She died in May. I never even saw the paperwork. You never got the mail, she said, because your mail was forwarded to his address last week. I checked. I closed my eyes. Rage bloomed in my chest, hot and dizzying. He forwarded my mail? Yes. Miss Clark's tone sharpened. He used the death certificate to claim you'd passed intestate without a will and positioned himself as your only heir. That let him access your checking accounts, your investment portfolio, and even a pending insurance policy you didn't know had matured. My jaw clenched. I trusted him with everything. She gave me a long look. You weren't wrong to love him, but now you need to protect yourself from him. I nodded. And Mary, she added, tapping a third document now. This is the worst part. She turned it around. I read the heading, Request for Liquidation, Caldwell Group Holdings. My company, I said, my voice barely audible. He's selling it? He's trying. It's in escrow. If the sale finalizes, you lose your controlling interest and your livelihood. And with your power of attorney overridden by that death certificate, I didn't hear the rest. My ears buzzed. Ms. Clark leaned in. Had you woken up one day later, your home, your accounts, and your business would have been gone. Legally, quietly. I sat still for a long moment. Then I looked up and said, "Can you stop him?" Her lips curled, just slightly. "Not only can I stop him," she said, sliding a pen toward me, "I can bury him, the legal way. And this time, I'd be the one holding the shovel." Miss Clark didn't waste time with pity. She brought me proof. 2 folders, 2 documents, 2 hammer blows. The first, a death certificate, forged, stamped, dated 5 days before my hospital discharge. Her finger tapped the signature line. "This isn't a doctor's hand," she said. "It's Daniel's." She slid over another sheet, side-by-side samples, old checks I'd written for him, the mortgage he begged me to co-sign, the same looping tail on the D, the same hurried slant. It was him, my son, signing me into the grave. I gripped the edge of the desk. Why would the hospital? They didn't. Ms. Clark cut in, voice sharp. He bypassed them, went straight to the county clerk, claimed you died at home, claimed you were cremated immediately, by request, no autopsy, no verification. A chill spread through me. I used to hold that boy when he was scared of thunder. I used to leave notes in his lunchbox. Now he was fabricating my cause of death. But she wasn't done. She opened the second folder. Bank withdrawals. Line after line. "Daniel accessed your accounts as executor," she said. $86,000, straight out of your retirement, funneled into an LLC. 2 days later, he tried to sell Caldwell Group Holdings to a shell company in Delaware. I scanned the document and my stomach dropped. That LLC, Laura's name. She told me she shut it down years ago. "She didn't," Miss Clark replied coldly. "It's been waiting. They built a paper trail. A story where you're dead, the business is gone, and every cent is theirs." My chest tightened. Before I could even open my eyes, Ms. Clark met my gaze, steady. "This isn't just betrayal. It's fraud. It's elder financial abuse. It's premeditated." The words cut deeper than any scalpel. I looked down at the papers. My forged death, my drained life's savings. 2 sheets of paper, clean, neat, deadly. "I want to press charges," I said, my voice sharp as steel. "I don't care if he's my son. He buried me alive." Miss Clark nodded once, firm. "Then we start by freezing everything. And Mary, you're not just surviving this." She leaned closer. "You're taking your company back." A beat passed. I looked down at the receipts, at the clean-typed debt that was never mine. 2 pieces of paper, enough to end him, enough to begin me. That night, I sat alone in the den, with every light on. The documents were spread out across the coffee table like crime scene evidence, which, in a way, they were. The death certificate, the bank records, the escrow paperwork. My name on every page, twisted and weaponized. The television flickered in the background. Some news anchor droning on about city council meetings and rising gas prices. White noise. Nothing could distract me from the realization that kept circling back like a vulture. If I had woken up one day later, just one, it would all be gone. My house, my company, my name, my life. Daniel had timed it with precision, filed the certificate 5 days before I was discharged, listed the business sale to close in 7. If I'd stayed under for one more day, if my lungs had taken just a little longer to recover, I'd have awoken to nothing, not even my name. The thought hollowed me out. I picked up the photo frame on the side table, the one of me and my late husband Charles, taken on our 30th wedding anniversary. I ran my thumb across the glass. He'd passed 8 years ago, quiet and sudden, a heart attack in the garden. One minute he was here, the next he was gone. It was always Daniel who reminded me of him. Same sharp chin, same charming smile, same stubborn streak. But Charles had a line. He had shame. He would have been sickened by what his son had done. I whispered into the empty room, "The boy we raised is gone, isn't he?" My voice cracked on the last word. The grief came in waves, not just for Charles, but for the son we thought we'd raised. The man I thought still existed somewhere beneath all that entitlement. The boy who used to lay in bed next to me with the flu, watching cartoons and reaching for my hand. Now he was filing my death behind my back. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. I pressed my hands to my face. Tears came. Not loud sobs, but silent, bitter ones. The kind that rack your ribs and leave you gasping. I wanted to scream, to tear the photo from the wall, to burn every trace of him out of my house. Instead, I just sat, let it crash over me. One day later, that's all it would have taken. One more day of sleep, and I would have disappeared. And no one would have known it was a lie. By sunrise, my hands ached from writing. But I didn't stop. Page after page, I laid it all bare. Every ignored call, every dollar that vanished, every email that didn't add up. Dates, times, names, years of betrayal, written like a ledger of sins. At 9 a.m., Ms. Clark called. "We're moving fast," she said. "I filed for an emergency freeze. The sale is dead in the water. But Mary, I don't just want to stop this. I want them exposed." My throat tightened. So do I. She didn't waste words. "Daniel and Laura will walk into the board meeting Friday with your forged death certificate, expecting no resistance." That's when we hit them. "I'll be there," I said. She hesitated. "You're ready?" "I'm alive," I told her. "That's more than I can say for their conscience." That afternoon, she uncovered more, the final nail. They funneled profits through a fake consulting firm Laura set up. Embezzlement. It ties directly to your company accounts. Once the board sees this, they won't just lose control. They'll lose everything. I didn't even blink. Good. I want them in the room when it happens. I want Daniel to look at me and know I came back. Silence on the line. Then Miss Clark said, almost with awe, "Understood." The next morning, I ordered a new suit. Navy, clean lines, sharp shoulders, pockets deep enough to carry the documents that would bury him. And that night, I lit a single candle and ate dinner off real china. My house was still cold, still empty, but the silence didn't feel like grief anymore. It felt like strategy. Because Daniel thought he had buried me, but I was the one holding the shovel. I arrived 10 minutes early. The security guard at the front desk did a double take. He whispered my name like a prayer. "Mrs. Caldwell," we were told. "I know what you were told," I said. "But I'm here." He pressed the elevator button without another word. Up on the 14th floor, everything looked the same. Same sterile lobby, same glass-walled conference room, overlooking the city I helped build. But when I walked through those doors, the energy shifted. They didn't expect me. Daniel sat at the head of the table, talking too loud. Laura perched beside him, sleek and smug in her pearl gray blazer. Their laptop was open, a presentation already queued up. like they were just a couple of ambitious professionals here to talk about transition strategies. I stood in the doorway, watching him soak up the attention of my staff, the same people who used to call me Mary with respect in their voices. Now they looked confused, alarmed. Then they saw me. The room went dead silent. Daniel's pen dropped from his hand. Laura's smile froze mid-sentence. "What the?" he muttered, pushing his chair back hard enough to squeak. "Good morning," I said, calm as a surgeon. I walked to the other end of the table, my seat, and set down a leather folder. Miss Clark entered behind me like a shadow with teeth. She greeted the room with a brief nod, then closed the glass doors behind us. The investors sat straighter. Half of them didn't know who to look at. Daniel stood. "This is highly irregular. She has no standing here." "Sit down," I said, not loud, not sharp, but with the kind of finality that made even the blinds seem to stop moving. He hesitated, then obeyed. Miss Clark opened her portfolio. "We'll keep this brief. We've reviewed the documentation provided by Mr. Caldwell regarding the proposed executive transfer. The board has the right to be informed of certain irregularities." Laura's voice cracked. "You're not a board member." "But I am," I interrupted. "Founder, majority shareholder, and most importantly," I leaned forward, eyes locked on Daniel. "Alive," gasps. Even the junior investor, the one who always chewed pens, stopped mid-bite. I placed the folder in the center of the table. "This contains a forged death certificate, illegally filed 5 days before I left the hospital." I flipped the first page. "This contains 2 asset transfers executed without consent using my forged death." Another page. "This," I said, sliding the final sheet across to the CFO, "is a document attempting to sell Caldwell Group Holdings, my company, without legal authority." Daniel's mouth opened and closed. No words, just noise. I sat back in my chair. I built this company with 3 credit cards and a folding table. And the man sitting across from me tried to bury me alive to steal it. No one said a word, because there was nothing left to say. Daniel's face turned the color of old chalk. "Mother," he croaked, "this isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," I cut in. "The business you tried to steal. The room where you thought no one would question a signature from a dead woman." Miss Clark stood beside me, calm and poised. She passed copies of the documents down both sides of the long glass table. "Everyone, you'll find 3 exhibits," she said. "Exhibit A, a death certificate filed under Mary Caldwell's name, filed while she was still admitted at St. Luke's." Someone gasped. A woman from legal flipped through the pages, her lips parted in horror. "Exhibit B, 2 bank withdrawals and a trust fund disbursement authorized by Mr. Caldwell under fraudulent executor powers." I was just protecting the estate," Daniel stammered. "Exhibit C," Ms. Clark continued, ignoring him, "is a business sale contract in escrow. This very company, Caldwell Group Holdings, set to transfer control to a shell corporation registered to Ms. Laura Caldwell." All heads turned. Laura paled, then made the mistake of speaking. "Those funds were—" "Daniel told me it was a family restructuring. We thought she was dead?" I asked. She didn't answer. I stood. I lay unconscious in a hospital bed while they filed papers to dissolve my life, not just my company, my bank accounts, my properties. Even my mail was rerouted. Ms. Clark added, "We've already filed a motion for injunctive relief, and we will be pursuing full criminal and civil charges for fraud, attempted theft, and elder financial abuse." Daniel sprang from his chair, red-faced. "You can't do this." I leaned in. "You already did." He turned to the investors. "You all know me. You know I've been loyal to this company." "No," the CFO interrupted. "We knew your mother. We didn't even know she was alive until 10 minutes ago." Laura stood too, trying to gather herself. Look, maybe things went too far, but none of this would have mattered if she hadn't. "Woken up?" I said. "You're right." Silence. Heavy, final. The board chair cleared her throat, voice low and trembling. I think it's clear we need to suspend Daniel and Laura from all company access immediately, pending full investigation. I second that, someone said. Daniel's hands were fists on the table. You can't just erase me. I met his eyes. You already tried. Daniel looked around the table like a man drowning, searching every face for a rope. No one moved. Then Laura cracked. Her arms folded tight, but her voice trembled. You said the bank approved it. You swore the paperwork was airtight. Daniel's head whipped toward her. Don't you dare! You set up the LLC. Half those transfers were your idea. She blinked rapidly, panic seeping through. You told me the estate was unclaimed. You said there was no will. You said she would never wake up. Gasps erupted around the table. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, "My God." It was like watching a dam burst. Every lie breaking open, flooding the room. I slammed the folder shut. Enough. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed every person who trusted this company. You tried to turn my death into profit. Daniel jabbed a finger at me, voice cracking. She's putting on a show. The board chair leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. No. You did that the moment you forged your mother's death certificate. His face went crimson, not from shame, but from exposure. A cornered child who finally realizes no one believes him anymore. Laura's voice dropped to a whisper, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I want my own attorney. The chair nodded. You'll both need one. Effective immediately. Suspended. Access revoked. Cards, passwords, all of it. Security. Please escort them out. Daniel shot to his feet, his chair skidding back with a screech. You can't do this to me. His voice cracked, desperate. This is family business, not fraud. Miss Clark didn't even flinch. Then why did you declare her dead? The silence that followed was deafening. Heavy. Absolute. The glass doors opened. 2 security guards entered. Laura didn't resist. She gathered her bag with shaking hands and walked out, her heels clicking like gunshots. Daniel lingered, shaking with rage. He turned to me, eyes wild. You think this makes you a hero? I stepped closer, meeting his gaze with steel. No, but it makes you unforgettable. A warning, a lesson no one here will forget. He sneered, but it collapsed into nothing. He looked around the room one last time. For sympathy, for support, for rescue, he found none. As the doors closed behind him, the boardroom exhaled. And for the first time in weeks, so did I. Not in grief, in victory. 3 days later, the news broke. Prominent local businessman investigated for fraud, allegedly declared living mother, deceased to access assets. My name was there, bold on the page. Not as a victim, as a survivor. Reporters called. Vans crowded the street. I gave one interview, careful and measured, with Ms. Clark sitting beside me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I told the truth. I woke up from a coma and learned I had already been buried. The headline wrote itself. Laura tried to play the loyal wife turned dupe, swearing she had been misled. But investigators followed the money, the LLC, the hidden accounts, her name inked on every transfer. She wasn't misled. She was a co-conspirator. That Friday morning, the police arrived at Daniel and Laura's condo with sealed warrants. Cameras had been tipped off. The flashbulbs caught everything. Daniel, wrinkled shirt, hair greasy, lips pressed tight like a boy caught with his hand in the till. Laura, no pearls, no polished smile, just bare-faced fury, her jaw trembling as if she might spit at the cameras. Neighbors whispered from balconies. Someone muttered, "That's her son?" Shameful. The photo hit the internet within the hour, and the internet did what it does best, turned it into a spectacle. Captions, memes, side-by-side shots of Daniel at charity galas, then Daniel in cuffs. My phone lit up like a storm. Old coworkers, friends from church. Even Gloria, the one who once swore Daniel was such a good boy, texted me, "I can't believe he did that to you." My reply was simple. Believe it. I did. But what shook me most weren't the friends or neighbors. It was the employees. One wrote, "Thank you for showing us what strength looks like." Another voicemail said, "I cried watching your interview. You're not just back, Mary. You're burning the house down." Not burning. Reclaiming. At the next Caldwell Group staff meeting, I walked into the glass atrium where I'd once stood beside my son, proud, blind. This time I walked in alone. At first, silence. Just the shuffle of chairs, people staring, unsure if they should stand, clap, or hide. Then one person rose, clapped once, another followed, then another. And then the whole room was on their feet. The applause wasn't frantic. It was deliberate, heavy, a verdict. Not just because I lived, because I fought back. I took the mic. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I'm not gone. And this company never belonged to anyone but me. The room hushed. For a second, silence. Then, from the back, a whisper carried forward, soft but certain. "Welcome home, Mary." And just like that, the weight lifted. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was home.